Well, Darren, thank you very much for coming.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
It's nice to see you again. I was very impressed yesterday with your remarks. I had so many questions, and I hope we will have a very interesting conversation.
Thank you. I look forward to it.
Yeah, let's have a seat.
Okay. Point of sanctions are to punish the most heinous human rights violations. Washington has increased the use of sanctions an astounding 933% over a two-decade period. By increasing commercial ties in Central Asia and the Indo-Pacific, you're in fact creating an economic deterrence. You're encouraging these countries to become closer to the United States rather than pushing them farther away.
Welcome to the Astana Times YouTube channel. Today we will have a chat with Darren Spinck, research fellow at the Henry Jackson Society. We're going to talk about middle powers and Kazakhstan's aspiration of becoming Switzerland of Central Asia. Well, Darren, thank you again. To start our conversation, I wanted you to elaborate on the two factors that contributed to the rise of middle powers that you mentioned yesterday. I think it's going to be a great way to kick things off.
Thank you, Aida. It's a pleasure to speak with you today. As I mentioned yesterday, the two factors that have led to multipolarity and the decline of the U.S.-led unipolar world, mostly the weaponization of the U.S. dollar and the rise of sanctions. As I mentioned during my discussion yesterday, Washington has increased the use of sanctions an astounding 933% over a two-decade period. This, in turn, led to dueling economies of the sanctioned versus the unsanctioned. And the problem is primarily that the overuse of sanctions has led to a decoupling of many of the middle power economies from the United States for fear of being caught in the sanctions web. This has then pushed them closer to economic ties with Beijing.
In your opinion, what kind of alternative approach could have been made to make sure that the stability is maintained in global order, and at the same time, U.S. could have saved its position as a global power?
Sure. The point of sanctions are to punish the most heinous human rights violations. Sanctions do not deter, as we saw in Ukraine. The Biden administration put in place a sanctions regime that did not stop the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And what resulted was sector-wide sanctions, secondary sanctions that impacted neighboring countries. In turn, this led to these countries questioning whether or not they wanted to maintain commercial ties with the United States and drew them closer to Beijing and Moscow. In my opinion, what would have been much more effective would have been diplomacy, dialogue, and increased commercial ties. By increasing commercial ties in Central Asia and the Indo-Pacific, you're in fact creating an economic deterrence. You're encouraging these countries to become closer to the United States rather than pushing them farther away. And in turn, you're becoming an effective counterbalance to Beijing and the rise of China. So the use of sanctions has actually been counterproductive over the past 2 decades.
You mentioned dialogue and diplomacy as a much preferred tool to deal with such issues, and Kazakhstan is a big proponent of it. Let's discuss Kazakhstan. You mentioned that, but it's going to be more on economic side about Kazakhstan. You mentioned that competition among great powers could lead to market distortions and inflationary risks, and particularly regarding the access to critical minerals. And you said that Kazakhstan could play a role in mitigating these risks and maybe enhancing supply chains and access to these critical minerals. Could you elaborate on that?
Certainly. In a forthcoming report from the Henry Jackson Society that's going to be released in November, I'm examining Kazakhstan as what I call a supply chain anchor. Kazakhstan is blessed with abundant resources, energy, rare earths, critical minerals. And at the same time, there's great transport corridor potential. By investing in Kazakhstan's transportation corridor potential, investing in their energy sector, their critical minerals sector, you're insulating the rest of the world from some of the leverage that America's and the United Kingdom's strategic competitors have. For example, China, in retaliation for export controls that the Biden administration placed on semiconductors and the machinery used for semiconductor production, put restrictions in place on the export of two critical rare earth elements, germanium and gallium, as well as graphite. This puts technology manufacturing at great risk in the United States for everything from military components to everyday use.
To like foam?
Exactly. Pretty much any piece of technology that you see out there in your car, your telephone, your computer requires rare earth elements. So by expanding the supply of rare earths, by investing in collaboration with researchers in Kazakhstan and neighboring Central Asian countries, the United States and the United Kingdom would be able to thus increase the supply of rare earths, minimizing the effects of restrictions put in place by some of America's and the United Kingdom's strategic competitors.
Mm-hmm. And you said that the United Kingdom, City of London, Wall Street should look into attracting or bringing private investment into Kazakhstan. Why? First question. And the second question, how can Kazakhstan increase its attractiveness? Maybe there should be some, reforms to make sure that Western countries and Western private capital would feel comfortable coming to Kazakhstan and invest.
Probably the best way to engage Wall Street and the City of London is through the Blue Dot Network. That was an initiative that actually was started in the Trump administration, and it's continuing in the Biden administration. It's not an investment platform in and of itself. What it is a certification platform. The steering committee is comprised of the United States, the United Kingdom, Switzerland, Spain, and a few other countries. And what they look at are infrastructure projects around the world. They determine whether it is a sound investment for private capital, whether it is a sustainable project. And then by giving it a blue dot stamp, that's hence the name of the initiative, it is a way to signal to Wall Street and the City of London that these are good investment opportunities. And what the Blue Dot Network does is it works through the United States and the United Kingdoms and the other partners' development finance corporations. In the US, it's called the US Development Finance Corporation. And in the United Kingdom, it's called British International Investment. And these two development finance corporations, in addition to the other ones, the other countries that are members of the Blue Dot Network Steering Committee, can then meet with private investors in Wall Street, the City of London, explain the opportunities, whether it is in port infrastructure development in Kazakhstan, rail development potential, building the highways in Kazakhstan, just developing the middle corridor in general, as well as rare earth mining, whether that's upstream mining, which is the actual mining process, or midstream processing, which is taking the unrefined rare earths and processing them for future downstream manufacturing for semiconductor chips and other technologies.
When we are, we're living in Kazakhstan and we're mostly exposed to the information that we get from here. Not many people are, researching what is Washington thinking, or London, or other capitals in the Western countries. And I'm interested in that. It's important to develop middle corridor. It's important to safeguard the supply chains, because it's so crucial for us, for the technology that we use. I don't know if you can answer this question, but do the Western countries and the Western capitals understand that it's crucial to collaborate and encourage this kind of investment, this kind of partnership with countries like Kazakhstan?
I don't think the potential for the middle corridor is fully understood at this point. And I think that will require the incoming administration in the United States, whether that's the Trump administration or Kamala Harris's administration, to look at the potential. For example, the middle corridor is actually 2,000 kilometers shorter than the existing northern corridor. It's also free from the risk of sanctions. So it's not only a quicker route, but it insulates companies that are in the transportation business and the manufacturing business from potential risk of sanctions from Russia or China in the future. So the middle corridor is probably the best solution moving forward for the export of the rare earths that I've mentioned, the critical minerals, energy export, as well as manufactured goods for trade throughout Europe and Asia.
Can we play a game? What kind of approach will be from the U.S. Administration if it's Harris administration or if it's Trump administration? Can we do that?
Certainly.
Yeah, let's try.
Okay. The Trump administration, I feel, will be much more pragmatic. They will understand the capabilities and the potential for tightening commercial ties with Kazakhstan and Kazakhstan's neighbors. My concern for Kazakhstan and the region as a whole is the Kamala Harris administration would view it from a more of an internationalist, globalist perspective. There may be an overemphasis on exporting U.S. democracy to the region, interference in the domestic affairs of Kazakhstan and its neighbors, which would be detrimental and would likely push the region closer to America's strategic competitors. Human rights plays a role. Obviously, the United States always wants its partners to not violate human rights of individuals, but at the same time, what are the region's human rights are not necessarily the same human rights as America's or the United Kingdom's. I'm referring to more of the export of a progressive social agenda, which may not be appropriate or appreciated by a relatively conservative region. So I feel that the Washington and London needs to respect the domestic affairs of Kazakhstan and its neighbors and understand that while certainly the development of certain progressive social policies in the United States and the United Kingdom may work in Western Europe, it is not necessarily a fit for everywhere in the world. Whereas the Trump administration will look at it, in my opinion, from more of a transactional point of view. How can tightening Washington's relationship with Astana be in the United States' national interest? And as I've discussed, it's in the United States' national interest to ensure that supply chains are free from leverage, free from sanctions, and that there is an abundant supply of rare earths, critical minerals, and energy, which does not allow any of America's strategic competitors to use these resources as leverage.
You know, the reason I asked this question, because when 2022 happened, I felt, as a journalist and as a citizen of the country, I felt like the interest, the attention from the Western countries increased dramatically. You know, there were a lot of state visits from foreign leaders. There was a C5+1, and not only with the US, but also with Japan. There's I think even with South Korea. Just in general, let's talk about the region, not only about Kazakhstan. Yesterday at the panel, when I was there and I was listening to you guys talk, and one of the speakers mentioned, I think he was from China, he said that when we talk about middle powers in Central Asia, we're not only considering Kazakhstan as a middle power, but also Uzbekistan. In your opinion, as an expert, why there is an increased attention?
As Washington and London both work to tighten commercial ties with Astana, there needs to be an understanding that there are geopolitical realities in place. Kazakhstan, for example, shares the largest continuous border with Russia. It's a neighbor to China. And the United States and the United Kingdom must look at relations not only with Kazakhstan, but the rest of Central Asia through a pragmatic lens. The Kremlin likely views its relationships with the Central Asian countries similar as it does to its other neighbors. It views it as a narrow broad, not necessarily a vassal state relationship, but a relationship in which it does not want Washington or London to have undue influence in the region, which could impact Moscow's security concerns. Beijing, on the other hand, is likely less concerned with security concerns and more concerned with Washington and London maintaining leverage over Central Asia and being able to exert influence on policy making in the future, which could negatively impact Beijing.
In your opinion, what are the advantages and disadvantages of being here for Kazakhstan as a country that aspires to become a middle power? Because, of course, it knows how to deal with great powers. It has been here surrounded by Russia and China for centuries.
Kazakhstan has multiple advantages with its geographic location, not only due to the potential for the transport corridor, not only for its abundant resources, but also for the potential to act as an intermediary in some of the world's worst conflicts right now. Kazakhstan can act as the proverbial bridge between the East and the West. And that's where I think the potential lies, in Kazakhstan's ability to raise its profile on the international stage through acting as an intermediary with diplomatic endeavors, whether that's reaching political solutions with Russia, Ukraine, whether that's reaching a political solution between Azerbaijan and Armenia, by demonstrating its ability to act as a neutral party with interests looking both toward the East and West. Kazakhstan can then work to gain further foreign direct investment from Washington and London.
Some of my, I've had a few guests in the program, and some of them actually said that they think that in the future, Kazakhstan can become a Switzerland with its neutrality, allowing the capital flow into the country, creating all the necessary institutions that can safeguard capital, investment, and et cetera. Your view on that, do you agree or not?
I agree. There is potential to be the Switzerland of Central Asia, to attract the foreign direct investment that feels secure in the region, by acting as a neutral party that is not going to take sides in disagreements between great powers. It can work, like I said, to increase its reputation, its profile on the international stage, and at the same time attract the foreign direct investment needed for its development.
And my last question would be, well, we were talking a lot about investment and foreign direct investment, economic opportunities, critical minerals. For Kazakhstan, it's important also to understand that while it strives to build strong economic partnerships with greater powers, it also needs to think about its national interests. How difficult it can be, in your opinion, right now in the moment of time we're living in, where like the world really wants you to take sides. You really try not to, but sometimes it's unavoidable.
My personal opinion is it is in Kazakhstan's national interest to remain neutral and not take sides. And the best way it can do that is by maintaining warm commercial ties both with its neighbors, Russia and China, as well as with the West. And with the West, it should not only be a relationship on increasing foreign direct investment, increasing trade, but there are soft power initiatives as well. I hope Kazakhstan continues to send students to the United Kingdom, to the United States, to learn English, to appreciate the United States and the United Kingdom more for just its investment potential, but for its cultural opportunities as well. And I think there are plenty of cultural opportunities and soft power initiatives that both Washington and London can work collaboratively together to increase cultural relations with Kazakhstan as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.